Hope you're having a great weekend. Those of you who worship with us at our other campuses and join us online, I'm so pleased that today we're going to jump into part 2 of this 6-part series called Dream Big, Think Small. And we're just going to begin with a picture. How many recognize this guy right here? Sir Paul McCartney, former Beatle. Paul McCartney was in Grand Rapids in August 15, played a concert, his one-on-one tour, Van Andel Arena with a 4-piece band. Question, how many of you saw the Paul McCartney concert? We were in town. Okay, a few of you. Chris and I scored tickets that evening. It was like a marathon-length concert. It was almost 3 hours, 38 songs. And my experience was that Paul McCartney brought energy, he brought focus, he did not phone it in. In fact, there was a time where the band took a break and took off, and he stayed out and did an acoustic set for like 3 or 4 songs, and then the band joined him again. Okay, you ready? The dude is 74 years old. 74 years old, and he brought himself to the concert. Now, the Beatles come to America, Ed Sullivan Show, was it like 1964? My friends, we're talking 53 years. He has been singing some of these songs for half a century, and he's still bringing himself to his work. I want very much to be like him because he's famous and rich. But there's another reason. I am absolutely fascinated by people who are able to continue to bring themselves. And not only bring themselves, but to bring their hearts and to bring their spirits over and over and over and over and over again. I think it's one of the challenges in life, not simply to show up physically, but to show up emotionally and to show up relationally again and again and again and again. Now, last week we talked about something called ant power. Ant power is small things repeated. Ant power is bringing yourself to a routine task, but bringing yourself again and again and again and again and again. We talked last week about how much of our impact and influence in life might depend on doing very much the same thing and often with the same people for an extended period of time. We talked about parents of school-age children who, you get Monday, you get them up, you get them dressed, you get them fed, you send them off. Tuesday, you get them up, you get them dressed, you get them fed, you send them off. It's like life on repeat over and over and over, but in that, there's stability that is built. Often our greatest impact and influence rests on doing very much the same thing again and again and again. We talked about coaches who intend to mold the character of student athletes, and often coaches, doesn't matter whether it's girls volleyball or guys soccer, whatever it is, you end up leading the same drills week after week, year after year. Sameness is just part of the program. Often, our greatest impact and influence is showing up and bringing ourselves again and again and again. My friends, that's ant power. Ant power is redundant. Ant power, it involves a routine. It's repetitious. It's powerful. It's life-giving. And it can exhaust you. The very activity that can lead to your greatest effectiveness can also lead to exhaustion. Bringing yourself again and again and again and again and again can drain you. So let's talk about that. How do you refill an empty tank? Because those of us that become specialists in pouring our lives into others had better learn to get good at filling ourselves back up. So let's start with this Proverbs chapter 10, verse 5. It's in the middle of your Bible in the wisdom literature. It says, "He who gathers crops in the summer is a prudent son." It's like a wise son gets out there, gathers crops during the summer. But, contrast, but he who sleeps during harvest is what? A disgraceful son. So it's like, listen, the wise son is the son who gets out there and brings the harvest in. The disgraceful son is the one that sleeps during harvest. And I've asked myself the question before, why in the world would anybody sleep during harvest? Why would anybody sleep during harvest? I've thought about this, I've reflected on it, I've meditated on it, and I think I have the answer. Ready? Because you're tired. That's insight. They pay me for this, yeah. Because you're tired, because you're drained during harvest time. Now, when we harvest wheat, we use one of these a lot of times. It's called a combine. They can be air-conditioned. They can have MP3 players and coolers. Back in the land of the Bible, you had this, and it did not have a cooler, an MP3 player, and it wasn't air-conditioned. This is called a sickle. Now, people still use sickles today in some parts of the world to harvest. I would like you to notice the posture. There is a lot of bending involved. Some of you pay a gym so that you can go and do squats. Listen, in an Old Testament harvesting structure with a system, you could cancel your gym membership for that month because you were going to be doing them all day in the hot sun. You're in the field when the sun comes up. You're there early. And you say, well, good, because you cut the grain. No, 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 that's just step one. Step two is you haul it to one of these things. It's called a threshing floor. Often it was a stone floor because the stalks of grain that you now have, you have to somehow get the kernels of grain separated from the stalk and the chaff. So you haul it all to a threshing floor, scatter it out on the threshing floor, and then you use one of these things. It's called a threshing sledge. It's just a board or series of boards. You drill holes in it and then pound rocks into those holes, and then you would have a donkey pull it around the threshing floor, a donkey or an oxen or a mule or a horse or a misbehaving child, and drag it around the threshing floor, and the rocks would separate the grain from the stalk and the chaff. And then you're still not done, and you get a pitchfork type thing, and you throw it up in the air and let the breeze carry away the chaff and carry away the stalks. And then you do that a few hundred times. You have a pile of grain. Well, now finally you can go home and go to bed. Usually not. A lot of times during harvest time, you would sleep outside next to your pile of grain so that someone didn't come and steal it that you've just worked so hard for. And this is what you do over and over and over and over. That's ant power. All I'm saying is that what may lead to your greatest effectiveness might also lead to your exhaustion. May I be crass for just a moment? Ant power can beat the crap out of you. Show up and bring your best self again and again and again and again and again. It can drain you. And so the image I want you to think about is just the image of a gas gauge on empty. And just want to acknowledge a fact right up front that those of us who make it our business to pour ourselves into other people can find ourselves absolutely drained. True? Any parents of young children in the room? Any parents of young children who are tired in the room? Woman pulls into the parking lot. It's a manufacturing plant. She has worked at this place for 17 years. Parks in the parking lot. There's the door that she has entered for 17 years. On the other side of that door, there are challenging situations, there are challenging decisions, and there are some challenging people. 17 years at this manufacturing plant, and she wonders how many thousands of times have I parked in this parking lot and walked through that door, not simply to show up and drag through work, but to try to bring the best version of myself again and again and again. Trust me, it can be draining. How do you bring the Paul McCartney question, he's been singing some of the songs for half a century. How do you continue to bring your spirit and your heart to your work? I was having a conversation with a doctor last week, a physician, and the physician mentioned the number of exams that he believes that he has done during his career, and it was astronomical. It was like hundreds of thousands of exams. And so I got home, and I'm going like, no, that can't be true. Wait a minute. And so I started to do the math. I said, okay, so a doc sees, let's just say he spends 10 minutes with the patient. An hour, 6 people. An 8-hour workday, closing in on 50 people. 5 days a week, 250 people. Even that year with 4 weeks off, if he works 48 weeks, we're talking 12,000 people 30 years in. He's seen 360,000 exams, 360,000 times that the door has opened and he walked into a room and said, what seems to be the challenge today? I'm just saying, how in the world, and the doc that I was talking to had worked over 40 years in a practice. The hundreds of thousands of times the door has opened, he's walking, here we go, and you give yourself again, and you give yourself again, and you give yourself again. How do you do that over time in a sustainable way where you're still bringing your heart? That's the question. The goal of Ant Power isn't simply to drag your soulless body back to the same job and say, well, I just keep showing up. How do you bring your heart? How do you bring your best over time? And I would just simply suggest today that those of us who are in the business of pouring ourselves out had better get into the business of filling ourselves up, or we will be living on a perpetually empty tank. I think today is an important conversation about how to sustain energy over time in life as we love people and serve people and lead people. So our structure today, what I want to do is I want to talk about 3 gifts that God gives in order to help us refill an empty tank. 3 of the gifts that God gives in order to refill an empty tank. And then I just want to talk about, a challenge, all right? A challenge at the end, or a caution at the end of that. So kind of a 4-point outline, 3 gifts, and then just a caution, which I think will be very important at the end. So the question, how do you refill an empty tank? Let's go back to the field. It's Wednesday. Guy, the wise son is diligent during harvest. The disgraceful son, sleeps during harvest. This dude, he is up, he is in the field as the sun rises, and he cuts the grain, and then he threshes the grain, and then he winnows the grain, falls asleep. That's Wednesday. What does he do on Thursday? Anyone want to anyone want to press snooze the next morning? Thursday morning, he's up. He's in the field as the sun rises, and he cuts the grain and threshes the grain and winnows the grain. That's Thursday. Friday, he's in the field as the sun rises, and he cuts the grain and threshes the grain and winnows the grain. Jeff, I get it. And then it's Saturday, and he goes out and he cuts the grain and he threshes the grain and he winnows the grain. No, on Saturday, he sleeps in. And on Saturday, he puts the sickle down. Because in Jewish culture, Saturday was the Sabbath. It was the day of rest that punctuated work, and I believe it is one of the gifts that God gives us to help us refill an empty tank. The gift of Sabbath rest. 3 gifts that God gives to help us refill ourselves as we pour ourselves into others. One is the gift of Sabbath rest. Now, this isn't just some idea that's buried somewhere in the Bible. I mean, this was one of the big 10. One of the 10 commandments along there with don't murder, don't steal people's stuff, don't steal people's wives and husbands. Is this, and by the way, make sure you take a day off a week. It's a beautiful thing. It's the gift of Sabbath rest. You find it in Deuteronomy chapter 5 in the 10 Commandments section. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. It says, on it you shall not do any work. Hey, neither you, nor your son or your daughter, okay? No, or your male or your female servant. Okay, I got it. No. Or your ox or your donkey or any of your animals. Even the critters get a day off, right? And the immigrants, the refugees that have come to your country, don't abuse them either. Very next verse, it says, nor any foreigner residing in your towns, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. There's something here that should make you want to like God very much, and that is that it was just not the wealthy or the ruling class that got a day off. It's not you, your kids, your servants, someone who's fled to your country. You make sure that everybody just gets a season of rest that breaks up their work. What God is proposing here is that there are seasons of rest that punctuate seasons of work. So their week looked something like this. Go, 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 stop. And that's what Sabbath means. The word Sabbath means cease. It means stop. It means put the sickle down. I think it was a life-giving rhythm to get us off the treadmill, so that life was just not work, die. It was a vacation once a week from our work. Now, Jewish Sabbath on Saturday. Saturday doesn't happen to be my Sabbath. I generally speak on Saturday evenings. Saturday is spent refining, material, making sure it's in place. Speak Saturday evening. Sunday, communicate twice. The Sunday for me, the Lord's, what's often called the Lord's Day, it doesn't happen to be my day of rest. A couple sermons, I have more personal interaction than should be legally allowed. It can be psychologically wearying. And so Chris and I, years ago, we set up our week like this: go, 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 stop on Friday, go, go. And so we kind of declared Friday as that day to put the sickle down, the day a week where the day would not be measured by how much we got done. It was one day where we weren't trying to fix the world. So we selected Friday as our day of doing that. Now, I'm just going to spend just a few minutes here talking about Sabbath rest as a life-giving force in your life, about how this principle of Sabbath rest can help refill an empty tank as you're pouring yourself into others. I'm just going to take a few minutes. What I plead with you to do, we've got the companion reading material from my book, Dream Big, Think Small. It's broken into 30 days of reading. Days 8 and 9, I kind of talk about the what and the why of what Chris and I have practiced. Not that you need to mirror the same thing, but just that we hope that you glean some ideas about what Sabbath could look like for you and what refilling an empty tank could look like for you. So, again, I share some of these things, not to say, oh, this is what we do, you have to do the same thing, but just say, these are some things that we found incredibly healthy over time. As you experiment and refilling your tank, these might be some things for you to consider, which may or may not be helpful. A lot of times on Friday, we take a long walk. I mean, unless it's a torrential downpour, 10 degrees, wind chill, below zero, we just love walking in often historic neighborhoods of our city. And it's just, there's really nothing we have to do. There's no place we have to go. It's a day of get to rather than have to. We put a to-do list aside and we stroll. We find that this recharges our batteries, that it helps to refill an empty tank. Something that is often part of your Sabbath, those of you who take Sunday as a down day, we just hope that the worship experience and the teaching, that it fills you. Particularly on those weekends when you're deeply discouraged, when you find yourself a little depressed. We just hope that the service lifts you and that you walk out with far more hope than when you walked in. That there's a sense that the mercy of God and the grace of God may carry you through the challenges you're experiencing and through the challenges you might experience. Even those of you that walk in, and man, things have never gone greater. Things are just going fantastic. We hope that there's something that meets your mind and something that meets your heart, that can stir you, recalibrate you, and again, something that lifts you and something that fills you. We believe that the worship experience is one of those things that can refill a tank that is getting drained. And just because you're here today, thank you so much for making this a priority. I believe that as you empty yourself, as you get drained, as you pour yourself out, you need things like this to help refill an empty tank. Again, I don't know what gives you rest. I don't know what fills your tank. One of the most restful moments I experience is sitting in front of one of these, a fire. I'm a certifiable pyro. We've got a fire ring in our backyard that we use over and over and over. There's something about an unrushed evening staring into flames that God uses just kind of to rejuvenate my spirit. And so I don't know what it will be for you. That's what it is for us. Some of you here we go. They do make coloring books for grown-ups, right? Seriously, some of you put arts and crafts aside years ago, and it's something that could refill and restore you, and maybe picking something like this up could be something that could rejuvenate you on a down day. When you put the sickle down and say, well, I'm not working, I have no clue what to do. Color, there we go. Some of you find opportunities to soak in Scripture that is different on a Sabbath rest day. It's not just, I'm going to get this read before I jump in the car and go to work, but you've got a little bit more time to soak in a story, to soak in a teaching of Jesus, and just say, God, I'm listening. Just try to meet me here today. The Bible or some other inspiring book that stirs you and you feel like it feeds you as you've been feeding others. Many have a Sabbath opportunity just to listen to music. That's a record, by the way. Question, how many of you listen to vinyl? Can I see your hands? Listen, on a Sabbath rest day, there's something about taking a record, LP, out of a jacket and setting it on a turntable and playing it, which is a little different than just having songs on a playlist just keep coming at us all day long. Some of you might find this practice refilling and therapeutic. Again, what's the question we're trying to answer here? How do you refill an empty tank? Life can be draining. Do you have days when you just do something that's fun that can fill yourself back up? One last image is just a meal. There's a meal with friends, gathering with friends, enjoying laughter, enjoying their company. Often when someone gets to the weekend, what they simply do is they change to-do lists. Say Monday through Friday, in some of our cases, we've had the work to-do list, and then we just switch that for the household to-do list. I would suggest that there could be health in having a day with no to-do list. We'll say, well, when do you get stuff done? We try to cram that into 6 other days so that one day a week we get up and we go, there's really nothing we have to go, there's no place we have to go, and there's nothing we have to do. Today is a day about get to, not a day about have to. Today, when we awaken, there's no place we have to go, there's nothing we have to do. And of course, that works like 50% of the time, maybe. I mean, just because we take Friday off, the rest of the world does not come to a screeching halt. There's wedding rehearsals, wedding, graduation, open houses, funeral visitations. I mean, all things that conspire, on Fridays. And even on those days when, okay, we really need to go there, often we slow our pace. We take back roads. We stop at a coffee shop on the way. We try to take this spirit of rest with us, even if there's a function that we need to attend. Every time I talk about this in front of moms and dads with small kids, they look at me with this glazed look in their eyes. As if, yeah, wonderful, set your work aside for a day. They are our work. I set them aside, they starve and burn the house down. How did you do Sabbath when you had 3 preschoolers? And the answer is badly and imperfectly, but I still suggest that there can be a restorative, refilling power in waking up one day a week and at least setting aside half a day and saying, so help me God, we will not rush. We're still gonna tend to these little human beings that are in our house. But today is not, we're gonna try not to make today about fixing the world and getting everything in place. We're gonna try to slow the pace today. What I'm suggesting is that a life like this will drain you. Just looking at it, go, 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 a treadmill that never ends. Just looking at it exhausts me. I'm going, what if your gracious God designed days of rest to punctuate weeks of work? Explore. See what fills you. It's often like learning a new musical instrument. It can take time to learn how to set work down. For Chris and I, maybe 6 months to a year until we found a rhythm that really, really worked for us. I believe that Sabbath rest is one of the gifts that God gives to refill an empty tank, because those of us who make it our business to pour ourselves out, to love, serve, and lead other people, we had better make it our business to fill ourselves back up. Or we will find ourselves running on perpetually empty tanks. And you can do that for a while. You don't want to do it for long. And the life gets sucked out of life. Gift number 1, the gift of Sabbath rest. In gift number 2, I want to return to this image of the table. This image here hints at the second gift that God sends our way, because the second gift God sends our way is the gift of refreshing people. The second gift to restore and to refill an empty tank is the gift of refreshing people. Not just, oh, I see, so they're days of rest. Yeah, but they're also people of rest. One of the most disrupting stories of the Bible, a guy by the name of David and Goliath. David, he becomes king of Israel. And toward the end of his reign, there is a coup attempt that is almost successful. There is a up-and-coming leader that gets his eyes on the throne, builds an army around himself, very suave, handsome, political, and begins to turn the people away from David and toward himself. And then finally comes the day when he masses this army and starts marching on Jerusalem, and the people are behind the other leader. What makes the situation more tragic is that the coup attempt is by one of David's children, a son by the name of Absalom. I just suggest to you that the day you learn that your son is going to kill you is probably going to be a bad day. And David hears Absalom is on the march and the hearts of the people are behind your kid and no longer with you, and he flees. He grabs his household and he grabs his loyal soldiers, and the royal family has turned into a parade of refugees, and their job is to get as far away as fast as they possibly can. And there is no time to pack. And it's this desperate, tired, dusty, exhausted, hungry, thirsty group of people who have fled the city, and finally they reach their destination at the end of their day. This had to have been the lowest day in David's life. And then 3 dudes show up. And even those of us who have been around church and sermons for years, their names are largely unfamiliar to us. A guy by the name of Shobi, a guy by the name of Maker, and a guy by the name of Barzillai. Shobi, Maker, and Barzillai show up to David. They find out where he's camped out for the night. They show up and they bring groceries. They also brought wheat and barley, flour and roasted grain, beans and lentils, honey and curds, sheep, read lamb kebabs there, and cheese from cow's milk for David and his people to eat. For they said, the people have become exhausted and hungry and thirsty in the wilderness. There is something about this scene that should touch us at a deep, deep space. Here is someone at one of the rock bottom, lowest points of their life. God sends the gift of refreshing people to say, we have found you and you are not alone. By the way, the opening verse that says they also brought, and you have all those food items, just above that says they brought bedding and they brought bowls for washing. You're dirty, you're dusty, you didn't have time to pack a sleeping bag, and you've got nothing to eat. Here we are, here it is, we're here to support you. What do you do when your tank is absolutely empty? A lot of times, God will send refreshing people into your life. This is a mom who's absolutely worn out with her preschoolers. They've been sick on and off, and a girlfriend shows up and says, listen, I'll watch them for a couple hours. Just get out of here, find a book, go to a coffee shop. Better yet, I will take them so you can take a nap. And a little bit of gas goes back into the tank because of refreshing people in our lives. In a wearying, draining stretch of life, this is that one friend that you can hang out with that does not drain you. You laugh together, you do things together, and it's a gift from God. Some of you know what this is like in a company where you have draining work, but you get to do draining work with good people. And you go, the work is hard. Challenging situations, challenging people, challenging decisions, but I get to work with some great people, and it's draining work with refreshing people. And God often uses us in each other's lives to put a little gas back in the tank. Often, one of the gifts that God gives to refill an empty tank is refreshing people in our lives. I need to challenge you. Some of you have draining lives, and you've cut yourselves off from the people around you. I think here of the teacher of third graders that just pours herself into these kids, and every evening when she goes home, she is just tired. I think of the marriage counselor. Every time that door opens and another person or couple walks in, it's another situation, it's another challenge. And you just pour yourself into people. It's the social worker who sees case after case after case after case. Listen. I just don't think it's very smart to then go home and spend all evening channel surfing or tweaking away on your phone. Here's the challenge. Often when we find ourselves discouraged or depressed, we start to cocoon. And we start to close ourselves off from the very relationships that could refill an empty tank. Often when we are weary or discouraged, we need to force ourselves to reach out to those friendships that can help to fill us back up. One more thing here before we move on. If you happen to have a friend group and there is a disposition towards angry complaint, and the whole angle of the conversation just drains you, it might be time to expand your friend group. To include some people where there is just refreshment and a level of positivity, and God is good and God is faithful and there is hope. And discouragement, you can visit that place. It's not a place to stay. You need to move past it. Many of us just need to begin to seek out some individuals. And I think that God will graciously send these people, but having our eyes open to recognize them and to invest in them as they invest in us. I believe that God provides Sabbath rest. I also believe he provides refreshing people to help fill a tank along the way. So about 4 years ago, I think it was February 4 years ago, I was speaking in Germany, of all places, Stuttgart, Germany. It was a large arena type event, and pastors and Christian leaders had gathered from around the country. And so I was there to do a talk, but then also got recruited to do like a two-person kind of panel discussion type thing. It was myself and a German pastor that was, deeply loved and recognized, and they didn't know me, but they knew him. And the group that we were had the conversation with was a group of Bible college students. I mean, mostly 18 to 25-ish Bible college students and seminary students. We had this discussion with men and women who were preparing for ministry. And it was just, here were like the two veterans, right? And just to answer questions. And I'll never forget one of the questions. Guy raises his hand and just kind of gingerly says, "It seems to me like all the pastors I know are either lazy or perpetually exhausted. Is there nothing in the middle?" She was like, "It seems to me like all the pastors I know are just lazy, or they're driven and they throw themselves into their work and they're hanging on by a thread and there's nothing in the tank." And as I listened to his question, I don't remember what response we gave, but as I listened to his question, I just thought to myself, dude, I've spent years of my life trying to answer that question, able to say, I hope so. I hope that you can bring yourself fully. I hope that you can bring yourself with energy and passion again and again and again, and not be constantly running on empty. So if we make it our business, if you make it your business to pour yourself into others, as a parent, as a coach, as a teacher, in a company, in a university, in a hospital, as a nurse, as a doctor, what are you going to do to fill yourself up? There are gifts that God gives. The gift of Sabbath rest, the gift of refreshing people, and the gift of himself. Often what Jesus desires to give you to fill up an empty tank is him. Check this out with me, Mark chapter 6. Jesus is crazy time with his disciples. There were so many people with requests, with challenges. They wanted healing for something. It says so many people were coming and going that they didn't even have time to eat. And Jesus says, "Come with me by yourself to a quiet place and get some rest." Now, Jesus spoke those words to his disciples, but just kind of let those words echo through the centuries to you. Just to hear the voice of Christ speak into your life. Come with me. Come with me by yourself to a quiet place and get some rest. For some of you today, that's the invitation you need to hear, the powerful words, come away with me, come with me. Jesus gives the gift of himself. I love this invitation in Matthew chapter 11. It says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Well, yeah, but how do I qualify? Well, let me see. What are the qualifications? You have to be really, really tired. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Jesus would then say, take my yoke. It's a wooden thing you put over oxen to pull a plow. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, because I am humble and gentle in spirit, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Jesus' voice echoes to us, come to me, come to me, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Some of you have found that rest, and some of you have absolutely no idea what he's talking about there. The anchoring point of the Christian faith is the crucifixion. We talk here about pouring ourselves into other people. My friends, this is where Jesus poured himself out for you. Often the idea behind a religion is to figure out those rules where you can finally measure up to whatever standard God is looking for. The point of the crucifixion is that Jesus did the measuring up for you. Is that the perfect Son of God takes on a human body, enters the planet, and stands in for you. God the Father doesn't have to punish you for your sins. Jesus was already punished for them. It's why Jesus could make statements like, if the Son of God sets you free, you will be really, really free. I've come that you might have life and have it to the full. What the cross means is that you are infinitely loved by God. I mean, Jesus would say before his arrest, he's talking to his disciples, and he says, listen, the greatest love you can show someone is to give up your life for them. No greater love has a man than to give up his life for his friends. You are infinitely loved. What this means is that a life of diligence, a life of bringing yourself again, and then you bring yourself again, and then you bring yourself again, and then you bring yourself again. Optimally, we bring ourselves and pour ourselves out, not in order to prove a point and not in order to prove our value. I've got to make partner by age 40. I've got to look successful. I only have value if my kids behave in public. I have no value unless the right people friend me or like my post. And it's this drivenness and sadness in just trying to measure up. The rest that Jesus gives is anchored in the fact that he measured up for you. And he gave his life for you in order to give his life to you. And now there's this ability when we're thinking straight to be able to pour ourselves into others because somebody was poured out for us. It's a totally different motivation change. And one of them can be joyless and driven, and one of them can be wearying, but somehow it's joy-filled and it's empowered. And I think that for the follower of Christ, one of the ways we refill an empty tank is by walking with him and by receiving the invitation of Christ. Come to me, all you who are worn out and tired. I'll give you rest. Yes, take this yoke. You will lead, you will serve, you will love, but my yoke is easy and my burden is light compared to being driven by some threat that you're trying to outrun. My weary friends, God gives us the gift of himself. Make it your business to serve, love, and lead well, to pour yourselves out for other people. But along the way, it is wise to become good at knowing how to refill an empty tank. God gives gifts, the gift of Sabbath rest, the gift of refreshing people, and the gift of himself. And we should be done with the sermon right now, and we're not. Because I have a caution, and this is likely to be highly disruptive. So promise not to walk out. What I want to suggest to you is that we live in a generation where there is more leisure and less rest. By more leisure, I would just say we simply don't have it as hard as our Depression-era grandparents and the hand tool farming generation that preceded that. We have more free evenings. We seek gyms in order to work out. They didn't need that. More leisure, less rest. And so let's start here. Let's start with those pictures that we looked at earlier, Sabbath rest. There's something that's not in that picture, and there's something that's not in that picture, and there's something that's not in that picture. There's something that's not in that picture, and there's something that's not in that picture. What I don't see in any of those pictures is one of these. See, I told you it was going to be disruptive. I like my phone. My phone, I can text friends in the middle of the day and say, hey, anyone free for dinner tonight? We had someone cancel on something. Anyone free for dinner? I like my phone. With my phone, I can call my parents who are in Florida right now. I like my phone. My daughter in Chicago FaceTimes us, and we get to watch our 10-month granddaughter Hazel on FaceTime. I like my phone. I follow a handful of people on Instagram because I like keeping up with where the lives of some of my friends, and that is why I check Instagram every day or so. However, I find it somewhat unnecessary to have to disrupt my evening in order to see that one of my friends finds it necessary to inform the world that they're in the drive-thru line at Taco Bell. Sometime this week, I want you to take your phone, and I want you to go, you are my servant, I am not your slave. You are my servant, I am not your slave. See, this is what's happening, my friends. We are rapidly approaching a point where we are incapable of having a conversation with a real human being. And there is not an app for building deep, meaningful relationships. We're losing our capacity to relate to real people in a real world. It's so strange, isn't it, that the device designed for connection now keeps us superficially connected with a ton of people, but can be a distraction, a perpetual distraction in our lives. One of the most important books I read last year was a book by a guy named Cal Newport. It was called Deep Work. And by deep work, he talks about people who are in the industry of having knowledge work. Knowledge work is looking at very complicated material and extracting value from complicated material. It's people that write computer code, it's engineers, it's academics, it's designers. And Cal Newport, what he suggests is that in order to do your best, deep, focused work, you simply can't do that while looking at your phone every 2 minutes. And that if you get really deep into your work and you're focusing and you're in this flow, and you're really working hard, and you look at your phone for something, an email, a text, a ping, it can take like 15, 20 minutes or more to get back into that flow. And so okay, the first half of the book, he's an academic, so it's all of these sociological studies that have been done to prove that. But you get to the second half of the book, and he starts to deal with social media. And one of the things Cal Newport says that I thought was such a breakthrough is this. He says that he runs into friends who say, no. At dinner time, we put our phones away. At dinner time, we put our phones away. Or when I go, whatever, for a walk with my wife, I put my phone away and then pick it back up. And Cal Newport says, think about reversing that. If you do deep work and hard work all day, you get to the evening and your brain needs a break. Think about reversing that. What is it like for the phone to be away and to say, rather than times when it's away, there are times when I will look at it. 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock, for 5 or 10 minutes, I will probably intercept any important text or emergency or urgency that's coming my way in a couple spots, 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock, rather than times when we put the phone down. What if there are scheduled times that we pick it up? See, I told you I thought this was going to be disruptive. All right. One tool that you might want to pick up, Deep Work by Cal Newport. Lots of studies at the beginning, great stuff on social media at the end. So you go, yeah, dude, I don't think I'm going to wade through, a 200-some page book for that. Okay, for you, I have this. a 15-minute video by a guy by the name of Simon Sinek, and it's millennials in the workplace. It's interview format, and he's sitting there, and for 15 minutes, he goes on this riff, and he's speaking to, looking at the audience. It's like 30-somethings, in the audience. I would plead with you, if you are between the ages of 14 and like 34, you have to watch this. If you're not writing it down, the children's game, Simon Says? Right? If you just type in Simon and millennials, Google search will probably fill in the rest for you. This is such a popular talk that he gave. And Simon Sinek, what I loved about this 15-minute talk, he talked about 4 things. 2 of them are critical for the series. One of them is he talked about patience, how long it takes to get good at something and how long it takes to make an impact. But the second one was how social media is how we have more relationships, but they're more superficial and they're shallower. He cites studies just saying the more time a person spends on Facebook, the more depressed they are. Listen, as he talks to 30-something, I think this is must viewing. It's like 15 minutes. It can be powerful. He uses the word addiction. He uses the word addiction in our inability to separate ourselves from our phones. All I'm saying is this: I think that we have more leisure and we have less rest. So while I'm at it, I love on-demand viewing. I mean, way back in the day, you have to wait till Thursday, 8 o'clock to watch some program. Now you can go to Netflix and just watch a series that you're into. One of the series I'm enjoying right now is Chef's Table, to see how, out of nowhere, these chefs began to do their work and rose to be the greatest chef in the city, or maybe the greatest chef in their country, or a Michelin 3-star restaurant or whatever. Beautiful music, beautiful photography. And so the Chef's Table, it's like they're maybe less than an hour each. Another one is the series Abstract, which takes photographic art, architectural art, graphic art, and again, beautiful music, beautiful photography, just how people create things. I like that program too. What I want to suggest to you is that there is a rest that can come, ready, with this rhythm, the rhythm of watch, reflect. View it, think about it. View it, think about it, watch, reflect. So watch a Chef's Table and go, awesome, that guy rose to be the best chef, in his city. Okay, time out. How did he treat people in the kitchen? Was he rude? Was he mean-spirited? Is there a trail of body bags behind his building this restaurant? Watch, reflect. There's an ability to go, yeah, he became a great chef, but he's not a kind person. Does some of success have to do with the way others are lifted up around us? You go, yeah, I want to be successful. I don't want to be that kind of successful. This happens when we watch, reflect. By the way, there is a different way to view, which is like this. Watch, 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 crash. We call this binge watching. It is possible that, we go, well, if one show is good, 3 must be great. No, it can be that 1 is good and 3 is numbing. And it can be that we wake up tired and we go to bed tired, and it's just watch, 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 crash. Of course, I'm not just talking here about television. I'm talking here about non-rejuvenating time wasters. I'm talking about clicking your life away. I am talking about my capacity to have a remote control, and if I cannot find one good program, I don't turn the TV off. I can toggle back and forth between 5 or 6 mediocre programs. If I can't find, is it just me? Can we start a support group together? We're talking about here is playing video games till the early hours of the morning. I'm just saying, it's like we have more leisure and less rest. What if God is giving us the opportunity for rest and we're squandering it with non-restorative time wasters? Yeah, come on, Jeff, tell me, what's the big deal? The big deal is that loving, serving, and leading people well will drain you, and you've got to find a way to fill your tank back up. The big deal is that there are teachers that went into education because they wanted to impact students, and they've become so drained they haven't tweaked a lesson plan in 2 years, and they're counting down the days to retirement like an inmate counting the days to the next parole hearing. Don't let that happen to you, or if that has happened to you, just go, my goodness, my tank is so empty. I've got to find a way to fill it back up. That's what happens. There are parents who are ground down by the very weariness of the situation, and they begin to resent their kids, and your kids will figure this out. Oh my goodness, if you pour yourself out, find a way to fill yourself back up. Don't give over evening after evening after evening to non-restorative time wasters. There's too much at stake. There are people that go into social work because they care about people. And between the paperwork, the government responsibilities, and trying to help people who really don't seem to want help, they say, I don't think I've cared about people for the last 3 years. This is what can happen when the tank gets dry and when it stays dry, when you function too long on an empty tank. And just to pick on my own calling and profession, pastors have a way of quitting long before they notify their boards. You'll still get my body in the office. You'll still get my body on a platform on the weekend, but you haven't had my heart in years. And those of you in ministry, I would just plead with you, don't let that happen to you. Or if you find that it has, do everything you can to receive the gift of rest that God is sending your way. Brings us back to this dude. Now, there might be a few reasons not to use Paul McCartney as a role model for certain aspects of his life. Maybe a bit of drug use in the 60s and 70s. But a guy that's 74 years old and still bringing his heart and still bringing himself, when he's done some of these songs hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, there's something about that experience that I go, I want that to be me. I want that to be you. I want you to grow in the art. See, ant power, ant power is powerful and life-giving and draining. So as you give yourselves away, I plead with you to discover those ways that you can fill yourself back up. I'm going to pray for us, and then I'll ask campus pastors, room MCs to come up and give you parting instructions as we take off today. So can I pray for us today? Gracious God, I give thanks for this day. I give thanks that we've had the privilege of gathering and exploring some teaching from your word, also examining our own hearts. I pray right here and now for weary moms and dads, for weary businessmen and women, for those who give themselves again and again and again in hospitals and in universities and in schools, in factories, in building sites, in restaurants. Lord, I pray that we would learn to rest in you. God, fill us so that we may serve and love with grace. In Jesus' name, amen.
This book right here is Jeff Manion's brand new book, Dream Big, Think Small, and it is the companion guide to this series. We want you to have a copy of this book. If you have not gotten your copy, please do so today. If you're viewing online, you can get this on Amazon or your favorite bookseller. Here, for those of you here, this is available in the atrium. So if you have $10 to give us for a cover cost, that's awesome. If you don't, please take a book anyways. We want you to have this book and to read it. So your homework this week, if you will, is to take this book and to read chapters 6 through 10. The way they are written is for you to read them day by day. And so read chapters 6 through 10 this week. I've read ahead. I broke the rules and read ahead. There's some great practical tips and help for you to carry out what you heard here today from Pastor Jeff. So get this book. Enjoy your week. Have a great week. We'll see you back here next week.